آله. قال سمعت فاطمة أنها قالت دخل علي أبي رسول الله في بعض الأيام فقال السلام عليك يا فاطمة، فقلت عليك السلام. قال إني يجد في بدني ضعفا، فقلت له أعيذك بالله يا أبتاه من الضعف. فقال يا فاطمة ائتيني بالكساء اليماني فغطيني به، فأتيت بالكساء اليماني فغطيته به، وصرت أنظر إليه وإذا وجهه يتلألأ كأنه البدر في ليلة تمامه وكماله. اللهم صل على محمد وآله. فما كانت إلا ساعة وإذا بولدي الحسن عليه السلام قد أقبل وقال السلام عليك يا أماه، فقلت عليك السلام يا قرة عيني وثمرة فؤادي. فقال يا أماه إني أشم عندك رائحة طيبة كأنها رائحة جدي رسول الله. فقلت نعم إن جدك تحت الكساء. فأقبل الحسن نحو الكساء وقال السلام عليك يا جداه يا رسول الله، أتأذن لي أن ندخل معك تحت الكساء؟ قال وعليك السلام يا ولدي ويا صاحب حوضي قد أذنت لك. فدخل معه تحت الكساء. اللهم صل على محمد. فما كانت إلا ساعة وإذا بولدي الحسين عليه السلام قد أقبل وقال السلام عليك يا أماه. فقلت عليك السلام يا ولدي ويا قرة عيني وثمرة فؤادي. فقال لي يا أماه إني أشم عندك رائحة طيبة كأنها رائحة جدي رسول الله. فقلت نعم إن جدك وأخاك تحت الكساء. فدنا الحسين نحو الكساء وقال السلام عليك يا جداه، السلام عليك يا من اختاره الله، أتأذن لي أن ندخل معكما تحت الكساء؟ فقال وعليك السلام يا ولدي ويا شافع أمتي قد أذنت لك. فدخل معهما تحت الكساء. الله صل على محمد. فأقبل عند ذلك أبو الحسن علي بن أبي طالب وقال السلام عليك يا بنت رسول الله. فقلت عليك السلام يا أبا الحسن ويا أمير المؤمنين. فقال يا فاطمة إني أشم عندك رائحة طيبة كأنها رائحة أخي وابن عمي رسول الله. فقلت نعم ها هو مع ولديك تحت الكساء. فأقبل علي نحو الكساء وقال السلام عليك يا رسول الله، أتأذن لي أن نكون معكم تحت الكساء؟ قال له عليك السلام يا أخي ويا وصي وخليفتي وصاحب لوائي قد أذنت لك. فدخل علي تحت الكساء. اللهم صل على محمد وآله. ثم أتيت نحو الكساء وقلت السلام عليك يا أبتاه يا رسول الله، أتأذن لي أن نكون معكم تحت الكساء؟ قال وعليك السلام يا بنتي ويا بضعتي قد أذنت لك. فدخلت تحت الكساء. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. فلما اكتملنا جميعا تحت الكساء أخذ أبي رسول الله بطرفي الكساء وأومأ بيده اليمنى إلى السماء وقال اللهم إن هؤلاء أهل بيتي وخاصتي وحامتي، لحمهم لحمي ودمهم دمي، يؤلمني ما يؤلمهم ويحزنني ما يحزنهم، أنا حرب لمن حاربهم وسلم لمن سالمهم وعدو لمن عاداهم ومحب لمن أحبهم، إنهم مني وأنا منهم، فاجعل صلواتك وبركاتك ورحمتك وغفرانك ورضوانك علي وعليهم وأذهب عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. فقال الله عز وجل يا ملائكتي ويا سكان سماواتي إني ما خلقت سماء مبنية ولا أرضا مدحية ولا قمرا منيرا ولا شمسا مضية ولا فلكا يدور ولا بحرا يجري ولا فلكا يسري إلا في محبة هؤلاء الخمسة الذين هم تحت الكساء. فقال الأمين جبرائيل يا رب ومن تحت الكساء؟ فقال عز وجل هم أهل بيت النبوة ومعدن الرسالة، هم فاطمة وأبوها وبعلها وبنوها. صل على محمد. فقال جبرائيل يا رب يتأذن لي أن أهبط إلى الأرض لأكون معهم سادسا؟ فقال الله نعم قد أذنت لك. فهبط الأمين جبرائيل وقال السلام عليك يا رسول الله. العلي الأعلى يقرأك السلام ويخصك بالتحية والإكرام ويقول لك وعزتي وجلالي إني ما خلقت سماء مبنية ولا أرضا مدحية ولا قمرا منيرا ولا شمسا مضية ولا فلكا يدور ولا بحرا يجري ولا فلكا يسري إلا لأجلكم ومحبتكم، وقد أذن لي أن ندخل معكم فهل تأذن لي يا رسول الله؟ فقال رسول الله وعليك السلام يا أمين وحي الله إنه نعم قد أذنت لك. فدخل جبرائيل معنا تحت الكسام. اللهم صل على محمد وآله. فقال لأبي إن الله قد أوحى إليكم يقول إنما يريد الله ليذهب عنكم الرجس أهل البيت ويطهركم تطهيرا. اللهم صل على محمد وآله. فقال علي عليه السلام فقال علي لأبي يا رسول الله أخبرني ما لجلوسنا هذا تحت الكساء من الفضل عند الله. فقال النبي صلى الله عليه وآله والذي بعثني بالحق نبيا واصطفاني بالرسالة نجيا ما ذكر خبرنا هذا في محفل من محافل أهل الأرض وفي جمع من شيعتنا ومحبينا إلا ونزلت عليهم الرحمة وحفت بهم الملائكة واستغفرت لهم إلى أن يتفرقوا. فقال علي عليه السلام إذا والله فزنا وفاز شيعتنا ورب الكعبة. فقال أبي رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله يا علي والذي بعثني بالحق نبيا واصطفاني بالرسالة نجيا ما ذكر خبرنا هذا في محفل من محافل أهل الأرض وفي جمع من شيعتنا ومحبينا وفيهم مهموم إلا وفرج الله همه ولا مغموم إلا وكشف الله غمه ولا طالب حاجة إلا وقضى الله حاجته. فقال علي عليه السلام إذا والله فزنا وسعدنا وكذلك شيعتنا فازوا وسعدوا في الدنيا والآخرة ورب الكعبة إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. فاتحة.
अफ़ज़लुस सलात मुहम्मदिन व आले मुहम्मद बर मुहम्मदिन व आले मुहम्मद सलावत। या अली लब पे मेरे सुबह मसा रहता है, या अली लब पे मेरे सुबह मसा रहता है, जामे कौसर मेरे होठों से लगा रहता है, या अली लब पे मेरे सुबह मसा रहता है, जिसके चेहरे पे खुशी नाम अली से आए, जिसके चेहरे पे खुशी नाम अली से आए, उसका चेहरा दमे आखिर भी खिला रहता है, या अली लब पे मेरे सुबह मसा रहता है। ए मुनाफिक मैं नुसेरी को बुरा कैसे कहूँ, ए मुनाफिक मैं नुसेरी को बुरा कैसे कहूँ, मेरे दिल में भी नुसेरी का खुदा रहता है, या अली लब पे मेरे सुबह मसा रहता है, या अली आपके आने की है काबे को खुशी, या अली आपके आने की है काबे को खुशी, अभी दीवार के हंसने की अदा बाकी है, या अली लब पे मेरे सुबह मसा रहता है। दुश्मनी है दर करार से करने वालों, दुश्मनी है दर करार से करने वालों, सोच लो अच्छी तरह रोज़े जज़ा बाकी है, या अली लब पे, या अली लब पे मेरे सुबह मसा बाकी है। पूछने वाले 1.25 लाख के सुन गौर से सुन, पूछने वाले 1.25 लाख के सुन गौर से सुन, अभी दुनिया में सलूनी की सदा बाकी है, या अली लब पे मेरे सुबह मसा रहता है, या अली लब पे मेरे सुबह मसा रहता है, जामे कौसर मेरे होठों से लगा रहता है। अफ़ज़लुस सलात मुहम्मदिन व आले मुहम्मद।
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Sayyid Hasan, Rizvi, respected elders, dearest brothers and sisters in Iman, Assalamu alaikum, Jamia wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. For the love of our fifth holy Imam, Imam Muhammed-Al Baqir, Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Surah Fatiha is requested for all marhumin listed on the screen, as well as all other marhumin. Surah Al-Mubarak Al-Fatiha. Dua Shifai Maries is requested for all those in need here and elsewhere, as well as those listed on the screen. Let us recite together. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. أَمَّن يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ 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 أَمَّن يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ. Ya Allah, let us now invite Sayyid Hasan Rizvi to please come forward for tonight's Majalis. By Muhammed-Al Muhammad Salawat.
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد. ثم الصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. Mu'mineen, mu'minat, brothers and sisters in Islam and Iman, Salamun Alaikum wa Rahmatullahi wa Barakatuh. Rajab al-Mujarrab Mubarak to all of you. And on this holy night, we of course celebrate the birth anniversary of our fifth holy Imam, Imam Muhammad-Al Baqir al-Ulum al-Nabiyyin alayhi salatu wa salam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. All of our discussions around the fifth Imam and then sixth Imam as well usually have to do with ilm and knowledge, scholarship, education, learning, those subjects. Most of the time, our interest in hearing about the Imam, both fifth and sixth, usually has to do with specific pieces of information that they've offered. We want to know their end results, right? Give me some amazing scientific discovery that they were able to say. Something that medicine didn't find out until hundreds of years later. This is usually, what we go after and what we end up hearing from the minbar. What were some of their fatwas? What were some of their explanations of the reasoning behind fatwas, right? This is the stuff that we look for. In a nutshell, what we like to hear and what we end up receiving also are the conclusions, the nata'ij, the end results of the Imam's work, right? That's what we go after. So the question for us is, being able to give that to all the mu'mineen and all the Muslimin at the time, okay, that's wonderful. But is that what really makes the Imam so amazing? Is that what really made him Baqir al-Ulum? If any teacher just gives their students a bunch of end results and conclusions, they're not training anybody then. If I give you the answer without showing you the work, then the answer becomes useless because you'll keep coming back over and over again, asking more and more questions. So our question, or what we should be investigating more, and inshallah we'll take a few minutes tonight to look at this, is what about the processes that the Imam was teaching? What were the methodologies that the Imam was offering? Right, again, and I want to steer away from the scientific, medical, all those things. I know that that is an interesting subject for a lot of people, but I want to go to more of the drier stuff, which is fiqh and usul, those things, which, again, we go after the end results sometimes, but the process really matters, and I'd say in this day and age, the process for how legal conclusions are derived is more important than anything else. More important than any scientific, historical, philosophical points. And it's for all the contemporary fitnas and issues that you and I are well aware of, and things that have been going on for the past few years, and they will continue to go on. My guess is that all of this and our continuing issues, the same sort of arguments and debates that we end up having every single year, have to do with a lack of understanding the process of how these sciences are engaged in. These Islamic disciplines. We don't know the process. We don't know what happens. Even in terms of just say the Hawza in general, right now, if you ask the average Shia, what do you think goes on in the Hawza? How do you think classes work? How do people gather? What time of day? What are they studying? What subjects? I've heard, very, very insane sort of answers, but that's what I expect because nobody's really sat down and explained things properly. And it's funny, unfortunately, even some, let's say, trigger-happy students, let me use that word, who want to, as soon as they get to the Hawza, they want to explain everything to the people right away. They saw that there was a gap in knowledge, they wanted to fill it, and they wanted to use, social media, excellent video skills, these kind of things, because that's the language people speak in. So they wanted to offer to people in the world, okay, what happens in the Hawza? What's the daily life like? What are the classes we teach? What is everything there? Why do some people have to take 20, 30 years in the Hawza? So some people have tried to explain this stuff. But unfortunately, even there, these foolhardy students, although their niyat is good, they want to educate people, they make mistakes in there too, because they themselves don't understand the process. Even the process of Islamic education is a gradual thing, which fully doesn't become understood until somebody really dives into it and is there for years and years and years. Right? And it's closely guarded for a reason. But what I want to look at tonight, inshallah, is kind of having this discussion about being result-oriented, as we are for many things, just give me the answer, versus being process-oriented. And I want to connect it to the idea of the fact of, why we are having so many issues in our day and age right now. And of course, how this was, the fifth Imam attempted to solve this in his time. Salawat ala Muhammad-Al Muhammad. Let's, for a second, put ourselves in the shoes of the average Muslim living at that time. Okay, maybe you don't care so much about the Umayyads, right? We're talking about the Umayyad Empire is still there, active, but kind of dying out. So they're there, but you're an average Muslim, you know that, okay, Karbala happened, you know that there's some oppression, you'd have some vague idea of the Ahlul Bayt, family of the Prophet, but you don't really know these, inner workings and what's going on. And just like the average Muslim was there, they didn't see the Imams as, these super, infallible, pious sources of guidance. They just saw, a lot of them just saw them as regular people who just happened to have knowledge, like any other alim or teacher of that time. That's why they saw them. Oh, the person's pious, they're from the family of the Prophet, that's what makes them, special. But that's it. Nothing beyond that. So you're living there, and now all of these new issues keep coming up. And there were things obviously addressed by the Prophet, but even at that time, right, I'm not talking too much later, a few generations later, new issues were popping up. And they were like, okay, well, how are we going to solve this? So for the general body of Muslims, for the general scholars, they had, okay, we got to figure this out. So they started coming up with their own systems. Said, all right, well, since nothing was left down to us, obviously for the general body, they didn't believe that, Allah even nominated somebody after the Prophet. So for everything else, they're like, of course, Allah doesn't necessarily care what we do. We make it up as we go along. So they started inventing methodologies like Qiyas. Like, let's just make a bunch of analogies, right? We'll take something, we'll make an analogy, and we'll see if it fits, right? So if we say that, okay, if, for example, I see that Allah has made alcohol haram. It's like, okay, I know that alcohol, it makes you forget about Allah. Now I see something else too, that, when people go and they, let's say, read poetry, well, sometimes that takes away people from Allah, so therefore I'm going to make it haram too. Because if Allah made alcohol haram because it takes away people from Allah, then I'm going to make the analogy that anything that takes away from Allah must be haram as well. Right? I'm giving you a superficial example, but you'd be surprised. There are many of the other side. Their scholars have made arguments in cases like this for a lot of different ideas. I've even seen in some books, some scholars try to make the argument for things like chocolate being haram because of its addictive properties. So Allah doesn't want people to be addicted, alcohol is addictive, therefore I'm going to make things like chocolate haram. This is in some scholars' books. It's not like the majority opinion, obviously, but this is the way some of them thought. They came up with other things. They have this idea of istishan. Again, these principles I'm talking about are not within the school of the Ahlul Bayt. These are the other sides. Istishhan, again, in kind of summarizing it, is basically somebody who's trying to figure out, okay, I need to know what to do in this situation. Let me look at all the variables in front of me. Let me use my common sense. Let me think about logically what's the best thing to do in this situation. And that's probably what Allah would want us to do. So I'll pass a fatwa like that. Like, for example, I feel like I've seen this in one of the books of another scholar as well, right? Can Islamic punishments be applied for somebody who breaks, let's say, traffic laws in an Islamic government, for example? Right? We know we have many different types of Islamic punishments, like lashing, stoning, death penalty, right? There's a lot of them, but these are like the famous ones. So some scholars ask the question, okay, well, breaking traffic laws, running a red light, that's not in the Quran or Hadith. So, well, what do? Well, common sense is, if Allah has put these types of punishments there, Allah doesn't want society to be doing dangerous things. It's obviously for the best for our society to follow traffic laws. So yeah, maybe it's okay for us to, whip or stone people who break, traffic laws. And some scholars have applied things like this. I'm giving you, again, kind of foolish examples, though they do exist, but you can take this to a larger extent of how some of these scholars at that time, and even now, they try to apply these principles. And why is it the case? Why are they just making up stuff as they're going along and introducing their own opinions, their logic and reasoning, or whatever they think works best? Why? Because they had no other recourse. They had no other choice. From them, after the passing of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, from then, all they really have is their own ideas. They had some initial companions that they tried to follow, but even then, the companions were arguing too. The companions weren't agreeing on what they heard and what they were narrating from Rasulullah. So then, the wide body of scholars and the average Muslim just started basically making up stuff as they went along. And of course, this same problem didn't exist for the followers of the Ahlul Bayt. One is because they would go to the Imam directly, and second, because the Imams were teaching their students the principles that they would need to be able to derive law properly. So look, when you're coming across these issues, don't just start thinking about this stuff on your own. Don't start making up your own ideas. That's not how this works. Let me share one hadith. Again, this is from, of course, Imam Al-Baqir alayhi salatu wassalam. And you'll see how harsh this hadith is. And the same type we have from the 5th and the 6th and even the 7th and 8th as well. Because, as you can understand, the environment that they're in, people are just making up things as they go along because they're really not sure who they should follow. A lot of them didn't have this connection to the Ahlul Bayt that they should have. So the 5th Imam is reported to have said, Man afta nas bighayri ilmin wala huda. Whoever starts giving out fatwas to people without any ilm, without any knowledge, and without hidayat, without any sort of guidance, then what happens? لَعَنَتْهُ مَلَائِكَةُ الرَّحْمَةِ وَالْمَلَائِكَةُ الْعَذَابِ. He says these guys are going to get two different types of la'na on them. And the Imam mentions two groups of angels. He says one, which kind of makes sense, the malaika of adhab, the angels that are entrusted or given this duty of, giving out punishment. It's like they're going to send la'na on you for passing fatwas when you have no right to. Okay, we can make sense. Yeah, an angel who does that, who's involved, their job has to do with adhab and punishment. Okay, we can picture them doing la'na. But the Imam also says, malaikatul rahmah, the ones who are in charge of mercy, they're also going to send la'na on you too. Which some ulama say, look, this is showing you this is a big deal. Don't start going around and start passing fatwas when you have no idea what you're thinking about, what you're saying, what you're doing. Again, for people of that time, and obviously this matters for us too, right? Don't just start making up fatwas as you go along. And then Imam adds on top of that, وَاللَّهِقَهُ وِزْرُ مَنْ عَمِلَ بِفُتْيَاهُ. And this person, whoever is, again, giving out fatwas and opinions based on having nothing there, but he's just going around telling people what to do. He says, this person, if others go around and follow those ideas, right? If I give my random opinion, I say, nowadays, drinking a little bit of alcohol, wow, what's the big deal? Back then, it was a problem. Times have changed. People can drink a little bit. They don't go crazy anymore. That's my opinion. Let's say I say something like that, and some of you go and follow that. All of that punishment comes on my shoulders too. Imam says that punishment, that adab, that sin, that burden, whoever went and started giving out these fatwas from his own opinion, his own ideas, he's going to collect all of that burden and punishment. Because he's going around misleading and misguiding people. Now, it doesn't mean you guys are off the hook either, but definitely there's a lot on me if I'm going around and saying all of these types of things. So it's not just the problem of passing out the fatwa, a fake fatwa itself, which is problematic. It's that you're going to be collecting the burden from everybody else too. And now, on the other side, you can imagine, when some people are so very harsh towards maraji and the ulama. Why don't they do this? Why do they have to do this? Why can't they make it so clear and clear and clear? Why don't we have all these answers? Why do they have to make these problems, etc.? Again, that very sort of accusatory attitude that people have towards the hawza ilmiya, towards the ulama, maraji, ayatullah, mujtahideen, etc. So look, most of these maraji, it's not like they said, you know what? I want to be a marja when I grow up. Here's my fatwa book. Now everybody go follow me. If you look in history, as far as I've seen, there's not one marja that's followed that ever had a life like that. Nearly every single story that you'll see about a marja, they never told anybody to follow them. In fact, the books that you see, Tawdi al-Masail or the different risalat that the maraj have, they don't write it themselves. It's usually their students who come and say, look, we've copied down your fatwa from your classes and now we want to publish it. And usually the maraj will say, look, we don't want that stuff published. We don't want people to follow us. For this reason, they said, look, if we were wrong, if what we said about moon sighting or chess or qasr prayers, if we're wrong in that, then that responsibility is on our shoulders. And it's after, really being pushed to this point that they say, fine, we'll take on this responsibility for our muqallideen. That's a big responsibility to take. It doesn't let us off the hook, but to a degree, the maraj are really putting this burden on their shoulders. Again, we're just, really putting, really just accusatory towards them. And again, at the end of the day, what are they saying? Wallahu a'lam, we don't know. Wallahu a'lam, Allah knows best. Every single time they try to do tafsir of the Quran, try to give an opinion about a historical issue, try to explain the reasoning behind something, or even give a fatwa, Wallahu a'lam, we don't know. We could be completely wrong, we're not sure. Allah knows best. Everything will be clarified when the Imam comes. See how very cautious they are compared to somebody who picks up the English translation of Shaykh Mutahhari's book, rahmatullah alayh, and they start passing out fatwas, like it's candy. Right? There's a much, much different approach in the akhlaq and the humility between us as lay people and the ulama who have trained properly in the hawza ilmiya. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. It's amazing, both young and old, whenever, the same issues come up every time, whether it's, again, moon sighting, it's chess, it's khums, the same conversations and discussions and arguments come up. Every single time. Every community that I've been to, same sort of issues. And there's always groups, every age demographic will always say, well, logically, common sense says, or if I'm using my human rationality, this is the conclusion that I would say. And they then give their opinion about it. Allah wants us to use science, so that's why we follow NASA, for moon sighting stuff. Or yeah, they gambled back then for chess, they don't do it anymore. So I'm using my common sense. Okay. Where has that been mentioned in the Quran and the riwayat of the Ahlul Bayt? That this is the process you're supposed to use when you're making your conclusions. Where was that mentioned? And we've talked about this, we went through months and months of a series of approaching some scholars who use that opinion, and we said that there's no evidence for that. But the average person, this is what they want to do. Now, I don't blame them 100%. The reason that I think people engage in this behavior, the reason that they say, I'm using my logic, my reasoning, my understanding of historical context, whatever it is, it's because they don't understand the process. If you ask them, what were the imams trying to tell the people of how to derive law? What do mujtahideen actually do? What do the ulama maraja? How does a idea or a question become a fatwa? How does that happen? You ask the average, grade school kid, I don't want to say average because, if I ask that, maybe outside of Florida, because Florida public schools are really, really bad. But if I ask the average public school kid in maybe a different state, how does a bill become a law? They could probably explain it, right? To some degree, maybe you can tell me how a bill becomes a law. I'm not going to tell you. Hopefully you paid attention to social studies, or those of you who took citizenship tests, maybe you know how it happens. But that's something that's taught in public school. If I ask you, okay, well, how does an idea become a fatwa? How does a marja, how does a mujtahid say, okay, is cloning allowed or not? How would a marja be able to decide that? How does a marja decide? What is the process there? I guarantee 90% of you probably can't answer. Or if you do, you have some vague idea in your mind, but you're not able to pinpoint it. So what we have in our mind is, well, the Imams, when they were giving opinions, they had the knowledge and they were using, because they were pure aql, pure rationality, pure logic, that's what they were giving. So we're just going to follow in their footsteps. But was that the actual process the Imams were teaching and what they're utilizing? Well, let's look at two riwayat. Again, both of them we're going to look at from Imam Al-Baqir alayhi salatu wassalam. So what are the sources that the Imam is going to mention to us? And this should be obvious, but sometimes we need to hear this stuff out loud. First hadith. Speaking to one companion, he tells him, he says, look, إِذَا حَدَّثْتُكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ. He said, look, when we relate something to you, when we give you some information, tell you an opinion, give you an opinion, a fatwa, whatever it is, فَاسْأَلُونِي عَنْ كِتَابِ اللَّهِ. Ask us where we got it from Kitabullah. Ask us that opinion that we're giving you, ask us about it in terms of where it came from the Quran. So the first source that the Imam was showing the general Muslim body, but especially the Shia, is that every single thing is traceable to the Quran. When we are explaining things to you, we can explain it from the Quran as well. This narration is a bit longer, and the person actually says, whoa, XYZ, like here's some ideas, how can you find this in the Quran? I don't have time, so I'm not going to go through that. Maybe another night we can do that, inshallah. But the Imam gives them the examples and he answers, 3 separate fatwas, he answers every single thing from the Quran. And if you look, in general, whenever the Imam answers, whether they were pro-Shia or pro-Ahlul Bayt of that time, or they had they didn't believe in the Imams like that, regardless, the Imams would always include ayat of the Quran in their answer. Now, when I say ayat of the Quran, somebody might hear that and say, yeah, that's great, now we have to go to the Quran for everything, and start giving answers like that. Now, yes, the Quran is obviously one of our 2 sources, but the way that some people use it, again, the average layperson, the way they use it is, it's interesting. And I'll give you just one example. And this happens more often than you believe. So, some conversations come up about Islam's opinion on democracy. And somebody came to me once, they said, Islam is pro-democracy. Islam wants democratic institutions and it wants everything to be democratic, pro-democracy. I said, oh, okay, well, what's your proof? They said, Surah Ash-Shura. It's like, what? Surah Ash-Shura meaning the verse about counseling, seeking counsel. That was their proof. They just gave me a name of a surah. I was like, oh, okay. That's how it works. Somebody else tried to prove to me that attending Jum'ah, Salatul Jum'ah, is wajib. I said, it's wajib? He said, yeah, it's wajib. I said, how do you know that? Because we have Suratul Jum'ah. I said, oh, okay. You're just going to give me names of surahs? I said, okay, fine. I said, did you know that it's wajib to eat elephants? He's like, what? I said, it's wajib to eat elephants. He's like, and they tell me, he's like, how is that possible? I said, Suratul Fil. See, same thing. I can use your reasoning against you. I'm like, and if you don't trust me, you're a kafir. I said, how can you say that? I said, Suratul Kafirun. And if you don't trust me there, you're a munafiq. You can see where this goes, right? Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So no, that's not the way you use the Quran, right? You don't just grab the names of a surah or grab 1 or 2 ayat that you maybe have heard and then kind of blurt it out like that. When the ulama look at the Quran, they have a lot of things to look at. I don't want to give examples, it's going to take time. But, there's multiple different approaches in using the Quran in terms of how you derive a fatwa. If you're making a theological or philosophical conclusion, which way do you do it? And again, most people that we have these discussions with, one of the first questions I ask is, look, if you're trying to derive your own conclusions by yourself, you're anti-taqleed or whatever, sure. And let's say they're giving me the ayat of the Quran, they usually give me English. I said, okay, so do you know Arabic? They said, no. I said, okay, so you're giving me, your opinion from the Quran from an English translation. I said, yeah, what's wrong with that? I said, where did this English translation come from? And they tell me the name. I said, okay, so you're doing taqleed to so-and-so translator. I said, no, I'm not. I said, yeah, you are trusting the Arabic knowledge of so-and-so doctor or so-and-so sheikh to translate the Quran for you. You're trusting their Arabic language. Do you know how many different translations of the Quran in English there are? The last time I checked, there was over 100. Probably even more now, probably close to 200. And yeah, maybe not everything has, major differences, but on certain key ayat, yes, the words, the meanings will change a lot. Especially the ones that talk about the Ahlul Bayt, certain translators make sure that they change the meanings there on purpose, right? So a knowledge of Arabic, classical Arabic, fusha, knowledge of Arabic poetry is required if you want to examine the Quran. And then of course the riwayat as well. So this was one hadith. One more inshallah and then we will end for tonight. One more salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And this is in a response to those who came to the Imams, thinking that the Imams were just these super logical, rational people giving out their ideas and opinions. Right? They're a scholar like everybody else, like the other people we see. The Imam Al-Baqir says to these individuals, Inna lo kunna nuftin nas bira'yana wa hawana. If we were to give out fatwas based on our own whims and desires and our own opinions, la kunna min al-halikin. We would have been wiped out and destroyed. We don't give out our opinions based on what we think is right, our own logic and reasoning. That's not how we do it. So then the Imam says, of course, our natural thing is, where do you get it from then? وَلَكِنَّهَا. So where does the fatwas come from? Where do they share these ideas? لَكِنَّهَا آثَارٌ مِّن رَسُولِ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَآلِهِ وَسَلَّمَ. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آله. What we are giving to you are the remnants, the conclusions. Everything is coming from Rasulullah. We're just giving that information to you because he explained everything fully. We're passing that on. Now somebody also might think, what about new issues? And then the Imam continues, وَأُصُولِ عِلْمٍ نَتَوَارُثُهَا كَابِرُ عَنْ كَابِرٍ. And the usul, there's principles that have been passed down from our forefathers, generation from generation to generation, which are with us as well. So it's either directly coming from Rasulullah, meaning we're narrating to you what he said, or we have learned the principles of how to give out these fatwas, again from the Quran, or these other principles that the Imams understand, and that's how we're explaining things to you. It's not from my own opinion, it's not my own desire or what I think is best for everybody right now. That's not what the Imams are saying. And then the Imam ends this hadith here, نَكْنِزُهَا كَمَا يَكْنِزُ النَّاسِ ذَهَبَهُمْ وَفِضَّتُهُم. Said, we, this knowledge, this ilm, these athar, everything that we have from the Prophet, which of course they're getting it, of course, from Allah. Everything that we've collected from Allah, from the Prophet, everything we've inherited from our forefathers, our predecessors, we store it, we collect it, and we treasure it like the general public does in terms of their gold and silver. The same way you collect all this stuff over time, the same way you inherit things. You take money from your forefathers, you collect it, and you utilize it. We do the same thing with ilm and knowledge, so we can pass it down in the exact same way. So, again, the conclusion over here today. What we were talking about was that there are different ways that we can look at and examine the Ahlul Bayt. We can just go and say, okay, give me the fatwas and opinions and hadith of the Imams. What's their conclusion? Scientific discovery, medical opinion, X, Y, Z. And we can take those, we can benefit, sure. And sometimes it's good to hear. That's good, maybe for level 1. What we need to do as a community of those who are trying to learn from the school of the Ahlul Bayt is to say that, look, the Imams, especially Baqir al-Ulum, Imam al-Sadiq, all of these Imams are trying to educate people in the principles too. To say, look, we are getting you ready for the ghaibah. We're not going to be around to give you the end results all the time. We're teaching you these principles. So especially for those who are anti-taqleed, then what was the Imam doing back then? If you're saying taqleed didn't exist till a couple hundred years ago, what was the Imam doing teaching all these ashab the principles and telling people, follow this so-and-so companion in Basra because he knows our usul, he knows our principles. Follow so-and-so in Kufa because he knows our principles. The foundations of taqleed were laid down from that time. That they were teaching them the process that when you don't have the direct idea in front of you, this is the way that you can derive it. So no, our idea about using logic and reason and thinking about stuff, and this is common sense, this is not what the Ahlul Bayt were trying to get across to us. They said, you need to have a strong understanding of the Quran, you need to have a strong understanding of everything that came from Rasulullah, and then of course by extension from the other A'immah, and then of course there's these principles that we learn too. Now again, this is all that's discussed in the Hawza. Nowadays, these are some of the things that, for many years they were left alone in the Hawza, but because now I think people are yearning for more, they're thirsty for more, because again, outsiders are coming, or sometimes even people from within, our own school of thought, are putting a lot of doubts in people's minds and strange sort of ideas and opinions. It may be helpful for us to learn some of these principles that take place, right? How are some of these ideas and rules, brought out? And maybe, I don't know if it's suitable for the member necessarily. Maybe in private sessions, or maybe, a special session on another night, we can start going through, simple, we say like a case study. If everybody has an issue about chess, I don't know why everybody's obsessed with chess. Everybody wants to give their opinion on chess. Like, okay, will you give the same opinion when it comes to, Maghrib and Isha, and how many times Tasbihatul Arba has to be recited? The same sort of common sense you utilize for chess or for khums or whatever, do you apply it for anything else in Islam? Why is it only for things that interest you, right? It's only a few things that you actually care about putting your opinion in. That's, we say, what is it, self-confirmation bias or self-supporting bias. Whatever you like and you want to do, then you're giving your common sense opinion. Everything else, you're like, yeah, I'll trust the Imams for that. Well, it's a very sort of selfish way of approaching it. Inshallah, hopefully, if Allah gives us tawfiq, in future sessions, we can maybe examine this stuff a bit more and learn from the principles that have been left by our Ahlul Bayt, alayhimu salatu wassalam. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Let's move on to our Slido quiz for tonight with another salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Oh boy. Assalamu alaikum to everybody. Labbaik ya Imam, guacamole, Debbie, Zainab Akbar Ali. Is that one name? Heart IEC. Zainab Akbar Ali loves IEC. Maybe I think that's one name, right? Okay. KSI 313. Brett Marr, specialist. Alfil, very nice. Logic question mark. SBM SD 786110. Yaman Arjuhu. Kulli khair. Is that the line? Oh, what happened? Uh-oh. Don't show the answers. Okay. Uh-oh, what happened here? Okay, now we're back. Okay, Imam, KQ, Abu, KM, checkmate. Islam Warrior 313, Qambar, somebody who's just a heart. Bay Meadows, well, a lot of interesting names tonight. People I haven't seen before. Truth Seeker, Abbas Suleiman, Muhammed-Al Muhammad. Yaman arjuhu likulli khair, right? It's not kulli khair, it's Yaman arjuhu likulli khair. I'm forgetting it. There's a lam before the kulli khair, right? Yeah, there's a lam there, yeah. So whoever wrote that, yeah, okay. Okay, how many people we have tonight? Wow, 47, very good. Okay, let me see, I'll get two more names. Rocket League, Musa, Rais, RMJ, Gulab Jamun, very nice. Okay, good luck to everybody. Bismillah. Hey, you guys starting it or what? What's happening? Okay, who gave Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam his title? Allah, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Jabir ibn Abdullah, or Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam? So was it Allah? Was it his grandfather? Was it his main companion that he met? Or was it his father? Who gave him this title of al-Baqir? Baqir al-Ulum. So this was something, according to our narrations, that was told to Jabir by Rasulullah. Rasulullah said that you will live long enough to meet this great grandson of mine who will open up the knowledge. He's al-Baqir. Okay, number 2. What is the connection between the word Baqar or Baqara and the title al-Baqir? Is it that Baqara means cow and Baqir provides knowledge like a cow provides food and milk? Baqara means splitting open and revealing, and a Baqir splits open and reveals knowledge and information. Baqara means lion, and a Baqir tears apart ignorance like a lion does its prey, or all of the above. Oh, I'm surprised everybody was confused about that one. No. The verb baqar or baqara means to cut or split or cleave, right? So yeah, he's baqar because he splits open and splits apart and reveals that knowledge and information for all of us. Okay, number 3. According to the 5th Imam, Islam is confirmed by the tongue, while Iman is Islam plus one other thing. Is it Islam plus taqwa, Islam plus amal in action, Islam plus ma'rifah, or Islam plus tawakkul? So there's a famous hadith where he says Islam is iqrar, Islam is testifying and confirming with the tongue, but he says Iman is iqrar and something else alongside too. So what is that second thing? What makes Iman higher than Islam? You don't just talk the talk, you have to walk the walk, right? It's action and amal. Asant. Iqrarun bil amal. Last question. What do the letters in GMT time zone stand for? General median time, Greenwich Mean Time, Global Meridian Time, or Generous Muslim Time? Generous Muslim time, meaning that when I tell you come at 7 o'clock, that means show up at 8 o'clock. Okay, most of you got that one right. Greenwich Mean Time. Okay, our winner for tonight, 4 out of 4, there we go, specialist. Hasan, very good, 30 seconds. Hussein in second place, also 4 out of 4, only 18 seconds behind. Mahmoud, also 4 out of 4, good job, 55 seconds. Qambar and Abu, both 3 out of 4 questions. Very quick though, 31 and 38 seconds respectively. Okay, well, again, once again, in Eid and Wiladat and Kushal Mubarak to all of you. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala Ahl Baytihi at-Tayyibin at-Tahirin.
Ready? Right here. Come closer.
Is it on? Is it on?
Move this side. Move this side.
Muhammad-Al Muhammad Salawat. With the loudest of your voices, Muhammad-Al Muhammad Salawat. Allahu, 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 Allah एक है, पंजतन पांच है, इमाम 12 है, मासूम 14 है। अल्लाह एक है, पंजतन पांच है,
इमाम 12 है, मासूम 14 है।
One more time all together please. अल्लाह एक है, पंजतन पांच है, इमाम 12 है,
मासूम 14 है।
पहले इमाम अली है, लक़ब जिनका मुर्तज़ा, और दूसरे हसन है, लक़ब जिनका मुज्तबा, और तीसरे हुसैन शहंशाह करबला, माँ फातिमा है जं की, लक़ब जिनका सैयदा। अल्लाह एक है, पंजतन
पांच है, इमाम 12 है, मासूम 14 है।
छोटे इमाम अली है, लक़ब ज़ैनुल आबिदीन, कहते हैं जिनको सैयदे सज्जाद मोमिनीन, और एक लक़ब है आबिदे बीमारो दिल हज़ीन, सजदों सजा के अभी मुनव्वर है यह ज़मीन। अल्लाह एक है, पंजतन पांच है, इमाम 12 है,
मासूम 14
है। पांचवे इमाम मुहम्मद है जिनका नाम, बाकर लक़ब से जानते हैं इनको खासो आम। है इल्म मेरे पांचवे आका का भी गुलाम, इनको सलाम करते हैं जिब्रील सुबह शाम। अल्लाह एक है, पंचतन पांच हैं, इमाम 12 है, मासूम 14 है। अल्लाह एक है, पंचतन पांच हैं,
इमाम 12 है, मासूम 14
है। मोमिनों के जाफर सादिक छठे इमाम, जिनका कलाम लगता है कुरान का कलाम। सादिक इमाम को तो, सादिक इमाम को तो है सच बोलने से काम, है फ़ेख जाफरी की शरीयत इन्हीं का काम। अल्लाह एक है, पंचतन पांच हैं, इमाम
12 है, मासूम 14 है।
और सातवें इमाम को काज़िम लक़ब मिला। मूसा है नाम, जाफर सादिक के लाल का, जो अपनी पूरी जिंदगी बस कैद में रहा, तो कैद को भी साहिब इज्जत बना दिया। अल्लाह एक है, पंचतन पांच हैं,
इमाम 12
है। 8वें इमाम हमारे अली रिदा, जिनको इमाम ज़ामिनो ज़ामिन लक़ब मिला। रोज़े में जाके एक है दरवाज़ाए शिफा, होती है हर मरीज़ को सेहत वहाँ अता। अल्लाह एक है, पंचतन पांच हैं, मासूम 14 है। अल्लाह एक है, पंचतन पांच हैं, इमाम
12 है, मासूम 14 है।
और अपने नवे इमाम लक़ब जिनका है जवाब, करते हैं जिनको नाम मुहम्मद तकी से याद। तकवा से जाके हारी गई कौम बदनिहात, सबने समझ लिया कि यह नफ्स से है जिहाद। अल्लाह एक है, पंचतन पांच हैं, इमाम
12 है, मासूम 14 है।
10वें इमाम जिनका है इसमें जली अली, अल्लाह की तरफ से मिला है लक़ब नकी। सूरत में जान की बाप का था हुस्न मुंजली, सीरत में जन के आई नजर सीरत है नबी। अल्लाह एक है,
पंचतन पांच है, इमाम 14
है 11वें इमाम हसन जिनका नाम है, और अस्करी लक़ब है, शहे खासो आम है। यानी खुदाई फौज का जो इंतज़ाम है, सब इनके हाथ में ये इनका मकाम है। अल्लाह एक है, पंचतन पांच हैं, इमाम 12 है, मासूम 14 है। अल्लाह एक है,
पंचतन
और 12वें इमाम ज़माने के ताजदार, और 12वें इमाम ज़माने के ताजदार, जो अपने नाम से हैं पैगंबर की यादगार। एक वस्फ में जो वस्फ खुदा से है हम किनार, पर्दे में है इमाम तो पर्दे में किरदिगार। अल्लाह एक है पंजतन पांच है,
इमाम 12 है मासूम
14 है। अल्लाह एक है पंजतन पांच है,
12 है मासूम 14
है। अल्लाह मोहम्मद वाल मोहम्मद सलवात।
हेलो सलाम। बनाना सलाम।
अस्सलामु अलैका या रसूलल्लाह, अस्सलामु अलैका या अमीर अल-मोमिनीन, अस्सलामु अलैकी या फ़ातिमत ज़हरा सय्यदती निसाइल आलमीन, अस्सलामु अलैका या हसन अल-मुज्तबा, अस्सलामु अलैका या अबा अब्दिल्लाह व अलल अरवाह अल्लती हल्लत बिफ़िनाइक व नाख़त बिरहलिक, अलैकुम मिन्नी जमीअन सलामुल्लाहि अबदन मा बक़ीत व बक़िय लैल व नहार व ला जअलहुल्लाहु आखिरल अहदि मिन्नी लिज़ियारतिकुम। अस्सलामु अलल हुसैन व अला अली इब्न अल हुसैन व अला औलादिल हुसैन व अला अस्हाबिल हुसैन व अला अख़ीकल अब्बास व उख़्तिक ज़ैनब जमीअन व रहमतुल्लाहि व बरकातुहू। अस्सलामु अलैकुम या अइम्मतल मुस्लिमीन अली इब्न अल हुसैन व मुहम्मद इब्न अली व जाफ़र इब्न मुहम्मद व मूसा इब्न जाफ़र व अली इब्न मूसा व मुहम्मद इब्न अली व अली इब्न मुहम्मद व अल हसन इब्न अली जमीअन व रहमतुल्लाहि व बरकातुहू। अस्सलामु अलैका या हुज्जतुल्लाह इब्न अल हसन या साहिबल अस्रि वज़ ज़मान, अस्सलामु अलैका या खलीफतुर रहमान, अस्सलामु अलैका या शरीकल कुरान, अस्सलामु अलैका या काबतल ईमान, अस्सलामु अलैका या इमामल इंसी वल जान, अज्जलल्लाहु लक मा वअदक मिनन नस्र व ज़ुहूरिल अम्र व रहमतुल्लाहि व बरकातुहू। अल्लाहुम्मा सल्लि अला मुहम्मद व आलि मुहम्मद। अल्लाहुम्मा कुन लिवलिय्यिकल हुज्जत इब्न अल हसन सलवातुका अलैहि व अला आबाई फ़ी हाज़िहि स्साअति व फ़ी कुल्लि साअ वलिय्यन व हाफ़िज़ा व क़ाइदन व नासिरा व दलीलन व ऐना हत्ता तुस्किनहु अर्ज़का तौआ व तुमत्तिअहु फ़ीहा तवीला बिरहमतिक।